Oh, the camera looks a bit nicer now without weird things coming through. I just opened the letter, right, from BC Health Insurance, and here's what it says. It's dated January 27th. Martin, subject, active medical services plan, account required, MSP account required. Thank you for your correspondence. Unfortunately, we are not able to process your request as your personal health number is not associated with an active MSP account. Okay, so that's kind of good because at the Service BC, the lady recommended, she's smart, she wants to actually not prolong issues and solve them. And she said, well, just start over and your insurance should now start again March 1st. And that's what I thought we did. That's the way I filled out my forms, but in my forms I always add more than they want to show how they've already victimized me and how I would like them to stop in the future and to please don't victimize me in these following ways. So this letter is kind of good news and bad news. So they say my personal health number is no longer valid, so maybe they're saying he's been gone too long. And then they say, you need a new MSP account, which is kind of good. I'll do it. And I'm not going to do it online. I'm going to send the forms and keep a copy of it. And there's strategic reasons for doing this in this particular situation. So when I do this, they might have a strategy, because the lady really gave me attitude when she looked at my account last time. They might have a strategy where they will plan to charge me for things later as a Canadian citizen when they shouldn't. And or the province of Quebec might, or Ontario, or BC, or whatever. And of course I won't do it. And I'll say, please bring me to court. We have a long story to tell the judge about my medical file in Canada, and it's going to take multiple days. Of course they won't want to, and this is where your credit gets hurt, right? Because these big governments or big companies, they can hurt your credit, which means your ability to work as a culture repair in a country, which is just very frustrating, because sometimes these things happen. They decide to do the wrong thing instead of the right thing at a time that I'm actually being of service to somebody, and it creates a big drain of energy, and I just want to leave Canada again. Whew, the nonsense. Since I was a kid I noticed this kind of nonsense in adults. If you are a resident of British Columbia, you are required to complete an application for MSP enrollment, and it says either online or do it here. Now these are pretty much the exact same forms I already filled out, and I have copies of them. So the other one just had my old number, so now I have to fill it out without a number. I don't know. So these are the forms that they sent me, okay? So this one and this one. And they gave a couple pamphlets and the envelope. So I'm going to send that in and try not to be stressed about it and forget about it and see what they do. So tomorrow, if the shingles vaccine is hopefully less than 100, I would pay for it and get it done, because I'm 50 years old, and at this age the risks are getting close that if I am going to develop shingles, it would be around this time. I'm very good at managing my stress, but I have more stress than the average person. So far I'm winning this stress game that, as you can see, I'm pretty functional for living the life uncommon that I do. And I have actually recently also started attempting again weeding off the only medication I take, which is modafinil, which of course I'm going to tell the person tomorrow, because I don't lie about medical stuff. It's not something that is a good idea to do for any reason. You can say how you disagree with things, and you can say how I take it for these reasons, even though the people that prescribe it put it under a different reason, which is always different, because they always think they have the best way to justify prescribing it for me, and all of them kind of contradict each other if you really look at all of their notes. But really, I know exactly why I'm using it, and this is a medicine that I've talked a little bit about before, and it's the only one I've tried to weed myself off, and I've noticed, with my own fine-tuned metapsychology, where I can observe the effects of weeding off is. And there were times that I'm trialing that I just ran out, and there were times that it was too hard and frustrating to get the prescription renewed that I just gave up. But in trying to get off in a slow way in the past, when I had that ability, was I noticed my brain was not able to replace that one compared to other medicines that impact the neurotransmitters in the past that I had, where my brain was able to replace them after times that I didn't need the medicines anymore. For whatever positive benefits they had, but they also had negative, and I'm not talking about the side effects that are written down, they're talking about numbing down what is normal human activity, let's say living a life uncommon and having certain feelings that are normal to have when I make choices, let's say, to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. But these medicines also did, in the long term, some harm because they weren't required, because they weren't really what was happening in my life in relation to interactions with the norm. So, and I've gone through a cycle many times, and then eventually when I came up with my own theory on HSD, and also how I actually suffer from species alienation because the majority suffers from HSD, is suddenly no more depressions. Anxiety is easier to manage. Whatever fun I might have had in the past with paranoid thoughts, which never escalated to what would deserve a diagnosis, but really had, wow, that's paranoia, and what's the best tool for that is checking it out and verifying the information, and then being honest with yourself that, hey, let's say eight times out of 10 that's not accurate when you verify it. But for me, the paranoid thoughts that I might occasionally observe, this qualifies as that definition, is legitimate 9 times out of 10. I find the data that makes it legitimate to have had such a thought, which is a self-defense mechanism. When you live a life uncommon and you kind of have other people feel like you're complicating their day and they make your day harder, then these are measurable things. You can actually, especially with my investigative skills and research skills, I can provide evidence of this. But still, with my theory, explaining how all these different variations that some people wanted to diagnose me with, which are normal brain reactions to have when you don't compare me to the norm, but you compare me to me, living my life in reality, then these are normal thought patterns. Now, they can get to unhealthy extremes, and such as depressions. I've had a few major depressions in my life, at least 3 that lasted more than a year each. Now, I have no fear at all of ever falling back into that pattern now, because of the progress I've made here, and also because when you understand what the triggers were and how it wasn't really something wrong with me, it was something right with me, then I broke that pattern, and that is something just for this point. By the way, I guess I'm going to turn this into one of the Doctor of Humanics videos. Okay, so this is my number 2. Sorry, I was supposed to define Humanics. I guess I'm going to do it in the notes, how I define Humanics, and also in relation to Doctor of Humanics. Okay, so I'm going to add that in the notes. So one of the things that I claim to call myself the Doctor of Humanics with confidence, and would engage in a public debate to defend that title, is that I've rebuilt my brain from being in a fetal position in bed for like a year in the past, right after my grandfather died in the late 90s, for example. If somebody can rebuild from being in deep depression and other extremes as often as I did, and then when you do that, now there is something that happens to the brain if you suffer from a few major depressions, is the pathways, the wiring gets habituated to that. So that takes kind of longer also to get out of it. But I noticed that even when I live a life uncommon and you think somebody will do the right thing and they don't, and it creates a deep feeling of despair, that despair over time used to last days for me to get over it. And I noticed, from about 5 to 3 to 1 year ago, because I haven't thought about it for about a year, so it must be excellent at this point, but I noticed how the period was getting shorter and shorter, than just a good night's sleep or just a couple hours. And then eventually, if I say, hey, let's make the effort to reframe this feeling right now, because the logical explanations are a good blend of sentience and sapience, is this, and it goes away pretty quickly. And that's deep despair. That's something that most people would, could be suicidal within a month with these kind of feelings, because there's no support systems to really help them with, other than just medicating them, and most antidepressants take at least 2 months to take effect. So one of the reasons I call myself Doctor of Humanics, and there'll be many in this 10 series, is I don't know anybody else who's actually rebuilt their brain so successfully in these cycles where I crash and then I come back. But to even this point today, that it is so, if something happened and, let's say a member of our species would need to go on a trip to Mars to collect a particular mineral that would be part of a vaccine to save the species, I don't think I'd trust anybody else but me to go, because that is such a challenging mission where you need to have been able to live with a sense of aloneness, but also develop a good series of human thinking tools and problem solving skills to succeed at this, and also be a lifelong learner. So that means learning things in a short time that I'd be very interested in, and quite encouraged to be put in that responsibility and that role to learn all these things that I'd be interested in, and also to be in a ship for a long time and by myself, maybe in enclosed spaces, all things I've proven that I can do, and also being able to solve issues even if contact is broken with Houston or whatever you might want to call it. So I don't know anybody else. You might say, oh, this astronaut has 20 years of experience. Yeah, but they don't have a balance of what you need for this responsibility. But of course, I would say, send us both, and don't send us in the same ship, because if that ship doesn't go well, send two of us. But I would really claim that what I've accomplished in rebuilding this, and the confidence that comes with it, which is not fake, and people hate me because they think I'm selling an image, like most people do. And then some people get a glimpse after they get to know me a little bit more, and they say, this guy's not selling an image. And, these might be unconscious thoughts that they're getting, where I think this guy's the real McCoy. And then they start kind of distancing themselves. And this is, their own triggers that they have to deal with, because I didn't do anything wrong. All I did was be consistent with them. I wasn't even trying to prove to them I'm me. I was just being consistent and demonstrating that what I say I can actually do. And then suddenly they feel, disconnected from me. Now, because they're not the minority, they're the majority, they suffer from HSD. Because I'm the minority, the only one I know so far that is the way that I am up here, that I'm quite proud of, is that I suffer from species alienation. I'm so disappointed and disconnected from my own species. And it's not because there's something wrong with me, it's because there's something wrong with them. And there's been this same human domestication syndrome sickness that's been wrong with them, even way before hundreds, thousands of years before I was born, so don't blame me for it. It can explain various crashes of past proto-civilizations, like the Roman Empire or things like that. So don't blame me, as the messenger. I'm just trying to teach you what I learned for your benefit as much as mine. So to finish this video, that will be the Doctor of Humanics series number 2, and I will write in the notes how I define. Now, how I define, by the way, is it includes a definition that I enjoyed one time, which is related to a Doctor of Humanics is not into being a helper and a healer for profit. It's really philanthropy is at the root. Now, philanthropy, again, is not rich people donating in very strategic ways that has as much designed to be of benefit to them than others, because that's egocentric philanthropy, and it's not the right way to define philanthropy. So you can't, it's like an oxymoron. So I do things for my worldview, which is the greater good of the biosphere. I'm the ecocentric humanist. So when I do things, and to great hardships and sacrifice to me most of the time, is because it's just the right thing to do, and that's what a Doctor of Humanics would do. So if you're saying, Martin, if you really want that title, why don't you go to that university in Japan? Or why don't you kind of do something that'll make Springfield College happy? Or why don't you, join this program of sociocyberneticists in Italy that always have ulterior motives, and say just put humanics somewhere on my PhD? Well, it's because they don't do things for philanthropy, and that must include the right definition of Doctor of Humanics. I'll write a little bit more about the definition in the notes. Okay, peace out. You like my new Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which I've decided to redo again today? And it's because I'm realizing, and I'm happy with this, that I have so much more that I choose to want to learn, and so much more that I choose to want to teach. Peace out. Lifelong learner.